Hello, my name is Nicola Pfeffer. I'm clarinetist and I'm especially happy to present you today some of my ideas, tips and tricks for the second Brahms Clarinet Sonata. Let me start by introducing the sonata by telling a little bit about the story behind. As many of you know, Brahms, after having composed his second string quintet, actually wanted to retire from composing. He sent his testament to his publisher Simrock and decided to not compose anymore. Fortunately for us clarinetists, this retirement didn't last very long because he met the truly wonderful and exceptional clarinetist Richard Mühlfeld, the solo clarinetist of the Meiningen Court Orchestra. Mühlfeld's playing was so exceptional and so different from other clarinetists playing that it truly inspired Brahms quite a big deal, and Brahms regained a lot of his inspiration by listening to Mühlfeld and his approach of playing the clarinet. Mühlfeld was actually a trained violinist. He played in the orchestra before in this group of the second violins, and only later began to play the clarinet, which probably is very interesting because he took many of the stylistic approaches of the violin playing and transferred it to the clarinet. So it is very well known that, for example, Mühlfeld played with a quite pronounced vibrato, and that his approach of time and use of rubato was quite different from how other clarinetists approached the music. In any case, Brahms was so inspired and so happy to having met Mühlfeld that a quite close friendship between those two developed. And so Brahms decided later to dedicate or to compose more pieces for the clarinet, but also, of course, for the piano, like the famous trio in A minor, Opus 114, the Clarinet Quintet, Opus 115, and of course now the two Clarinet Sonatas, of which we're talking about now, the second sonata. Let me start by talking a little bit about the first theme. I think it is very important to start without any kind of accent or emphasis on the first note, very lightly, almost a little bit like the beginning of the Fourth Symphony. And in this little theme, let's say, there is already much of the motivic material that is very crucial and very important for the entire sonata. So we hear an appoggiatura, which comes back very often. Actually, in this sonata movement, the music moves very much to the middle of the measure, quite a big deal. And we hear a very important interval in the second measure, the tritone, which will be crucial to the further development of the sonata. The entire mood of this E-flat major is so youthful, so carefree, and so full of joy, very positive actually. So it forms quite a contrast to the F minor sonata, for example. I would suggest that you form and shape very actively these sequences in bar 3 and 4, and phrase together with the piano on the rising E-flat major scale. Then in bar 10, for me, it is very important to play this arpeggio, not academically and not to put too much emphasis on the quintuplet, actually. Just give it back very free and with a great sense of rubato to the piano. Further, we have a quite intense dialogue between the left hand of the piano with the clarinet. And what is important to notice is that Brahms writes these little hairpins, which in his case does not have to do so much actually with dynamics. He uses these hairpins quite often to demonstrate that we should take a little bit time, or that we should play a little bit with the rubato. And this actually leads to a very difficult piano solo, which is interrupted by deceptive cadence of both clarinet and piano, leads to a some kind of a very nervous, very active collapse in the clarinet part, resulting again in a descending tritone. It is very interesting to see actually this dialogue between clarinet and piano with the left hand of the piano in the octaves. So this is kind of a transition motif that apparently tries to lead us back to the first topic, which is in a certain way a perfect example about how Brahms moves the music to the middle of the measures and uses very delicately these appoggiaturas, and I think it is, in a certain way, is extremely romantic. And again, with the sottovoce, Brahms reminds us a little bit about the second motive, second theme from the exposition. Although by moving again to the second bar and moving the music more to the middle, he transforms this motive directly into a very rich and very wonderful sequence that is formed together with the piano. There's a very light-filled and very fulfilled, almost dreamlike dialogue with the piano coming up. Time stands still, actually, as we have this rich dialogue with the piano. That is actually based on a motive that connects both the F minor sonata and the E flat major sonata, of course, as well as the clarinet trio. It is a chorale from the final chorale, actually, from the St. Matthew Passion by Bach, which Brahms used as, let's say, thematic material for both, or for all of these clarinet works. The chorale is called Wenn ich einmal muss scheiden, so scheide nicht von mir. It translates roughly to English by When I must depart, do not depart from me. And again, it shows Brahms' deep occupation with the passing of many of his friends, and actually shows that before he composed the clarinet works and, of course, the piano intermezzi and other works, he was quite depressed. He was not really he was not feeling very well, and by using and restating this Bach chorale, which serves a little bit as a memento mori element in the clarinet sonatas, one reminds the player, despite all this youthfulness and joy, about death is going to happen. What is happening in this rather small part of the development is actually we have several chromatic shifts that play with timbres and sound colors quite a lot, like a romantic landscape forming and shaping different colors, and it is a little bit searching, almost like flowing into infinity, I would say. So there's little to say how you should play that, but what I can ask you to do is to try a lot with your chamber music partner to find as many sound colors as possible, to develop an own concept for rubato, and be as creative as even possible. So by having these chromatic shifts, actually Brahms, the player loses oneself a little bit. We don't know where we are at this very point, and the music comes back to the present, to reality a little bit, back from this romantic idea of losing oneself in bar 86. And by then, a very majestic, almost ravishing reminder of the first theme comes back to the player's conscious. Which leads again into a deceptive cadence. So we are totally the wrong key. It is not the resolution that we actually wanted to hear. And Brahms puts in the piano, again, a pedal point with many repeating notes in the bass that remind us a little bit about the timpani playing in the first symphony. Above that, in bar 93, we hear again this choral motif of the Bach St. Matthew Passion. The music then comes back to the recapitulation. It is a little bit more covered, I would say, in terms of sound color, and a little bit more mature than the beginning. The beginning doesn't have a memory. It is fresh and also innocent. Here we have so much to digest in this very, very short time, actually. And when we reach the recapitulation, I feel like we have to show a little bit that so much happened to this theme that we, until this very point, heard so often. So I would try to just have a little bit more a covered sound color and go with these flowing tuplets of the piano. It is not really sentimental, but it is yeah, I would say a little bit, yeah, covered or more mature than the beginning in the exposition. One of the bigger differences actually is the transition to the second topic, which is totally different from the exposition. We can hear that in the transition of bar 119 to 120. Unlike at the exposition, there is not such a crash, such a collapse before the second topic. The music is instead here. We have a very smooth sung transition. We hear again the sotto voce in bar 120, but it's somehow, it is more like a reminder of what happened so far. It is not, it has a different character, even if it says in the score sotto voce 2. It is for me a little bit more knowing of what happened, and it has this great momentum. Many of the motivic material actually happens, returns in this kind of recapitulation, also like this Schumannesque motif in bar 138, which is maybe now more rich and more mature too. We hear the same amount of enjoyment and fascination for this beautiful music, and the returning octave motif in bar 146 appears again. However, I think here Brahms introduces also like a psychological change. He prepares with this octave motif actually this transition into this wonderful E major infinity in bar 154. So this is a very special moment in the sonata, and what Brahms actually does in this entire passage is that he elevates the music more or less 3 times. We have, let's say, the key change, then we have this tremendously beautiful Molto dolce sempre in bar 158, which probably cannot be more beautiful, is the chant of the angels. And then again, we have the tremendously beautiful Tranquillo in bar 162, where Brahms unifies these little tuplet motives from the development with a scale of descending fifth in the piano. And one of the greatest gifts of the late Brahms to me is that despite all these tragic elements and this also his occupation with death and passing away, this ultimately positive gift is that he is at the end positive. And here we can actually hear this. This is one of the most, for me, one of the most beautiful moments in the entire sonata. Let me play a little bit for you the transition to the E major, although we don't hear it for the moment as there is no piano, but I try to imitate it a little bit as if there was one. This Bohemian tuplet motive from the exposition we hear at the Molto Dolce Sempre, which I'm also going to play for you a little bit. This is a little reminder about the tuplet motive from the development. And yeah, with this strong sense of cadence, actually, Brahms restates E flat major and E flat major again until to the very end, after the scale of descending fifth. And Brahms concludes this movement with a low F on the clarinet that forms actually the lowest note of the harmony. So we should make sure that it's very well in tune, also if possible in the French clarinet, to really conclude this wonderful, tremendously beautiful movement in a nice way. Now let's continue with the second movement, Allegro appassionato. In many ways, it forms a contrast to the first movement, which is an E flat major. The second movement is an E flat minor. Unlike the traditional sonata form, we don't have any slow movement in the sonata, and yeah, it is also less through composed. It is in an ABA form, and it plays a little bit with this interplay of clarinet and piano. As we have an ascending E flat major scale in the beginning of the first movement, now we start the beginning of the second movement with a descending E flat minor scale in the piano, which also forms a kind of a very high contrast. The first theme, let's say, it is divided into two smaller sections or two smaller motives and a larger phrase, which he marks with espressivo. What is especially interesting to know that in bar 2 we have a very, very interesting dissonance with the piano, so we should put a little bit an emphasis on the G, this little appoggiatura there, and phrase then again to beat 2 in measure 4, where we add to the G flat major of the piano. Let me play that for you. So apparently this appassionato character and mood was very important to Brahms. And what we should take care of is not, despite the idea of playing very passionately, to not get harsh in the sound and not to get sort of stiff sound-wise. So we have to, in a certain way, also to blend to the piano, which is not so easy. I mean, if we play with a big grand piano, with a big modern grand piano, it is much different from the piano that actually Brahms played himself. This piano is more singing, more lyrical, and blends very well with the boxwood clarinets of that time. So despite playing forte, we should take care not to create hard or harsh sounds at all. So what is very interesting on top of this appassionato nature of the movement is that Brahms plays quite a lot with rhythmic shifts, let's say. So it is in a certain way not totally clear where we play an upbeat with our eighth notes at the beginning, or if this is meant to be as a hemiola. Sometimes Brahms gives us a hint with how he places the slurs or how he places also these little hairpins. But I would say most of the time it is totally against the bar line. It is something that is very interesting to discover and also to discuss with your chamber music partner, because these decisions are not made only by looking at the clarinet part, but also this harmonic phrasing of the piano plays an important role. Once you dive into this, to these theories or to these ideas, the movement gains quite a lot of interest and also of character, let's say. So a good example about these rhythmic shifts do actually occur in the forte piano, where we interrupt the chord of the piano. So I would clearly say that this phrase doesn't put an emphasis on the notated G flat in the clarinet. Rather, it starts on beat 3 in the bar before. So that is in any case very interesting to discover. Additionally, what I find very interesting in this movement, as also in the first movement, is Brahms' use of hairpins. I think they're generally not meant to have so much to do with dynamics. Brahms uses these kind of smaller hairpins also to indicate that we should play freely, that they have more to do with time than actually with dynamics. They are meant to be in a rubato way of playing. So generally there is in the A part a contrast between little extroverted playing and a rather more sensitive piano playing, like for example in bar 49 with upbeat. Again, you see these metric shifts that are also indicated or notated, let's say, with a slur and a phrasing slur. You can note all these little hemiolas and how it is really composed against the bar line. Also there we should make sure to clearly make a difference between major and this minor shades that he puts in the clarinet part. Then again, we can also hear these hemiolas after the fermata in bar 65, where he actually writes them as an augmentation of the motive from the first topic. Somehow they underline a little bit this very declamatory character of the music in this part. obviously the B part that follows now, the sostenuto, is much, much different in character. And while I think the piano solo is very majestic and very grand, somehow has this choral-like feeling, I personally sense that the entrance of the clarinet is meant to be more intimate. And also very lyrical. So Brahms actually underlines this by putting an expression mark, piano ma ben cantando. It is very important for me to work quite a lot on the intonation, to have a perfect legato, and also to relax these long notes quite a bit. Brahms helps us by writing actually quite often a diminuendo under longer notes, such as the beginning. This comes also because the boxwood clarinet that Richard Mühlfeld, the clarinetist of the first performance and a close friend of Brahms, played, these instruments are made in a specific key system, Berman-Ottensteiner clarinets, they're called. And what these clarinets don't do very well is like holding, sustaining notes and have this kind of unflexible character. So these clarinets are very colorful, and actually they invite the player to move and to be very flexible with the sound as well. So we should keep this in mind. This entire section is not very easy in terms of intonation, because also we have lots of these throat tones, and we should make sure to have them tuned out quite perfectly. And another thing that is not so easy to do, but rather interesting, is we need to have a great ambitus in terms of dynamics. Brahms gives us quite a lot of indications on how to shape the phrase and form the dynamics. Such in bar 121, he writes for us forte ma dolce, which is really interesting and also fun to do. And also quite noticeably here, Brahms writes little accent on the hemiolas, and I would state them quite clearly and quite obviously. So, despite of having this very noble, elegant beginning of the B part, we have to develop a sense of great, majestic sound in this very point. Many elements return actually in the reprise of the A part, which follows now. We're leaving this more choral mood and emotion of the B part and return to the extremely passionate, extremely extroverted A part of the beginning of the music. Actually, it is not quite different from the beginning. Also, Brahms didn't write it out at all in his manuscript, and the movement ends again with this very declamatory augmentation of the first motive from the beginning. Now we continue with the third movement, which is a set of variations. So to begin with, it is very important to actually understand the structure of the movement. We have a theme plus 5 variations and a coda. And what is interesting to see is that actually Brahms creates a sense of a three-part or three-movement a conception of the last movement. So I guess the theme and the first variation, the second variation, and the third variation kind of form one group. Then we have a fourth variation that is set apart by fermatas, and of course an Allegro plus the last coda of the movement, which gives the impression basically of a three-movement work. Interesting to know is also that just as in the second movement, the Brahms plays a lot with the idea of rhythmic shifts, and it is interesting to see that all the variations are actually inspired by an upbeat. So let's start maybe by talking a little bit about the first theme of the variations. Just as in the second movement, we notice like rhythmic shifts in all of these upbeats. So I think I would say almost none of these upbeats are actually meant to be an upbeat. They are Brahms wants us to emphasize their beginning more, and this idea or this conception is also supported by looking at the harmonic nature of the piano part. Brahms helps us a little bit by putting slurs and phrasing marks, of course. Interesting to know is besides also his dynamic marking. Poco forte doesn't mean mezzo forte at all, which is sometimes a little misconception. What Brahms actually meant to have is a piano sound with the energy of a forte. And as we can see, the upbeat to measure 4 is marked piano. This little motive, this last motive, or let's say codetta of the theme, plays an important role because Brahms actually combines or uses this motive as a transition material between almost each variation, and of course, it forms a tremendously important. Plays a tremendously important role in the Allegro and the coda. So this is a very special moment. Sometimes Brahms also marks it with calando or sostenuto, but that is very important to know and actually to see. I don't want to lose so much time talking about the topic or the first theme, because the theme of the variations, because once you have understood this concept of metric shifts and hemiolas, it gets all a little bit more clear, and then it is up to you and your chamber music partner how to shape and design this theme in terms of tempo. However, it is interesting to see that Brahms in the following variations 1, 2, and 3 actually creates a notated accelerando, meaning that the first variation with upbeat to measure 15 actually has an 8th note pulse. The second variation, however, already has a pulse of, let's say, 16th notes in tuplets. And of course, the very gentle, playful variation of bar upbeat to 43, measure 43, is already written out in 32nd notes. So it is, what happens is some kind of an organic accelerando. But of course, having understood this, it is also possible to design and shape and think about carefully about each and every character of each variation, and of course the tempo, which must not necessarily be equal, of course. So talking a little bit about each character of each variation, I think the first variation, upbeat to measure 15 again, is more or less a direct echo of the theme. So we have the same conception of metric shifts, and the piano adds a little bit to this rhythmic uncertainty, let's say. While the second variation is very Viennese, and it plays a lot with this kind of upbeat gesture and movement, and it is very, very delicate and very, very positive. Also, almost like a little bit, let's say, dance-like. So that is very charming, actually, and it encourages or underlines Brahms' very poetic and lyrical approach of using the clarinet and the interplay and the blending of clarinet and piano. Again, in this variation, upbeat to measure 37, we have a tragic element where Brahms briefly moves the music to minor, and it is very, very interesting because these little shifts to minor also come back in the following variation. So I think this should be played very expressively and very with a great amount of emotion. Before returning to the initial thought of the variation. The following variation is very playful and very light somehow. It has almost some Schumannesque elements, I would say. And in terms of technical difficulty, it is very important to on a tonal basis, blend to the piano and really match the sound color of the piano. I think my understanding of this variation is a little bit that we add to the piano as if we were an 11th finger of the pianist. But then again, also we have a technical difficulty that we really need to directly connect to the two instruments together, which is not so easy. I would really urge you to practice that with your chamber music partner very slowly and almost know the music by heart, because if you start reading the music, you might already be too late. But then again, talking about the music, you have this very Brahms writes grazioso, which gives us a clear idea how the music should be played. It is very light and very charming somehow. Somehow it is in a certain way the opposite of many people's conception about Brahms. We think about him as an old man who liked dark and sound and equal sound through the registers. I think this variation proves us wrong. This is meant to be very colorful and very charming, very inviting, and in terms of playing with the sound colors of your clarinet. So I really celebrate this light energy and this positive, almost this direct dialogue with your pianist. The fourth variation, I'm sorry, is separated from the rest by fermatas. And that is very interesting to know, because once we have talked about the impression of having a three-part movement and not only a continuous set of following variations, this might give the idea of an intermezzo, or don't want to say slow movement, because this variation actually gives us much creative room for different tempo choices. However, upbeat to bar 57, it is very important to see that at the beginning you are merely an accompaniment to the piano. So you give certain rhythmic impulses, I would say, that later on develop into a bigger momentum as you go. And in bar 65, you continue to give this very sensitive but important rhythmic impulses to the piano again. The end of this variation, regardless of what tempo you choose, it might be slower or might be faster, but I would invite you to clearly do the calando, which is extremely important to prepare also for the fermata. Make sure that your low A doesn't get too sharp in this very moment. The Allegro sort of surprises the listener with a very big, almost symphonic piano concerto-like introduction of the piano with playing the theme in E flat minor again. And what the clarinet answers is it is actually very important to do the very same phrasing as your pianist just did. As you can see in bar 85 with upbeat, Brahms introduces again here in minor the final motive of the theme. As a short reminder from the theme. So what happens is actually that this little motive gains more and more independence and importance for the development of the coda. So when the clarinetist gets back in after the piano solo in bar 96, it is really important to interrupt the piano by playing a clear fortepiano. And while we play these tuplets, the piano actually presents a very choral-like and singing variant in major of this little motive from the theme. The music becomes greater and greater as the clarinet states again an upbeat motive which relates to the beginning of the movement. The music becomes more spacious and somehow more and more fantastic. The music gets more grandioso with each and every of these little upbeat motives, and culminates actually to bar 115, where suddenly it falls back apart and results in a written out accelerando. I would say this entire gesture is very like a texture for string players. Let me play a little bit for you. And so on and so on. Brahms, what he does is actually writing out an accelerando, which leads to all this set of diminished chords in bar 130 and onwards. Maybe these chords and these kind of wild arpeggios in the piano demonstrate a little bit his love and his fondness, let's say, for Hungarian music. So Brahms, as we all know, had a very particular Hungarian style in that he occasionally wrote. And what then happens is we have this culmination, let's say, of the motive from the beginning of the theme and the end of the theme. Like I feel Brahms somehow merges these themes and condensing them and intensifying them more and more as he goes. So so that also the general musical, emotional impression gets more and more intense and more jubilant, greater, I would say. So, for example, he introduces again all these rhythmic shifts and states within these shifts also the theme of the movement. I would say that all these rhythmic shifts intensify the musical tension and joy and prepare for this very, very majestic, positive and beautiful ending of the third movement of the Brahms Clarinet Sonata. I hope that you enjoyed some of my ideas and some of my musical tips for the third movement of the second Brahms Clarinet Sonata in this little video tutorial for Henle Verlag. Thank you.